Welcome to another Monday Match Points. I'm Jeff Stouse, an assistant director here with the NSAA. I have my usual crew with me today with Ken and Kim and Craig, and we're going to dive into a couple things that have come up here over the first couple weeks of the season. It's hard to believe we're already in week 3 of competition, but here we are. So a couple quick reminders from the NSAA side of things on some common questions that I've received in regarding non-varsity uniforms. Uniforms do not have to match at the non-varsity level. They don't have to be identical. They have to have those permanent numbers, but you can have duplicate numbers on the roster for lower level matches. That being said, you could have 3 number 5s on your JV team. You can only have one of those number 5s in the match at the same time. That's been a really popular question early in the season. So that's for both officials and coaches watching the video, just to keep that straight, that you can have duplicate numbers on those lower level teams. They just can only have one of those numbers in the match at the same time. And then the other NSAA rule, I guess, that I want to cover really quickly is student match limitations. That's been another very popular question that I've received over the first couple weeks of the season. So I'm just going to run through this real quick, and this can be found in the volleyball manual as well for both coaches and officials. In all non-tournament competitions, so duels, triangulars, double duels, whatever it may be, no student can participate in more than 2 matches per day. And so that's any participation in a set counts as a participation in a match. So whether or not you play 20 points in a set or you play 1, that is participation in a match. Students are limited to 6 matches per week, and that does exclude tournament competition. So any of your matches that you're playing in a tournament don't count towards that number of 6. And any matches that would be postponed for any specific reason, that does not play into the student limitation in terms of the number of contests. In tournament competition, students can play in 4 matches per day in Nebraska. If you travel out of the state of Nebraska and that state allows it, you can play up to 5 if that's the rule in that state. And then finally, if your student, if you're a coach and your student is one of those kids that bounces back and forth between JV and varsity, you have to have them pick what tournament they're going to play in if there's a JV tournament and a varsity tournament happening on the same day. You got to pick which one they're going to be a part of. They can't play in both. So for the officials in regards to student match limitations, it's not your responsibility to track that. The score and the school are keeping track of those things. If it's discovered by the score or brought to the scorer's attention that a student has violated that limitation for the day, the scorer will notify the officials of the violation and assess the penalty, which is a loss of rally, and then the student is removed from that set, and then the match continues. So just wanted to remind everybody of those rules. With that said, I'm going to kick it over to Craig and dive into a couple other hot topics, I guess, that have come up over the first couple weeks of competition. So Craig, go ahead.
Yes, Kim, do you want to talk about the net sequence first, and then I'll kind of go over the other 2?
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah. So just a review on if there is somebody in the net, remember as R2, don't rush the mechanics. So you will blow your whistle, and then whichever side of the net, sorry, I talk with my hands, and I'm sure all the officials appreciate that, but whichever side the net happens, that is where you would show the fault. So you tweet, show the net, and then you give the net signal, which I'm doing, and then you give the number of player that was in the net. So if it was number 7, you would fill your right hand first, and probably on the computer, this will look opposite, but you'll fill your right hand first, show the number to R1, and then award the point with R1 to the team that is receiving the point, okay? Remember, 5 is fill your hand first, 10 is this, and then so if it's 12, then it would be this. So just showing you some of those things. So just quick review. As R2, blow the whistle, go to the side of the net in which the fault has happened, give the net signal, give the number of player, and then award the point. And as R1, you award the point and give then the number of who was in the net. So if it was number 12, you would award the point and then show the coaches or the team what number was in the net. And I know we have many coaches that still ask R2 for the number. R2, you can keep things moving and just say, hey, it was number 12 and move on. So hopefully that helps.
The only thing I would add to that is R2s, make sure that when you blow the whistle on that, it's not a tweet because it's live ball. So it is a whistle, a full whistle, and then don't rush. Kim and Craig and I have talked about it. Jeff, we've talked about it. The mechanics, don't rush it. You've blown the whistle, you stop play. You've got plenty of time to take your time, take a breath, get to that side of the net like Kim said, but don't get in a hurry. They will wait for you. Give the information to the R1. Good job, Kim. I think explains it well.
Yes, and the other thing, Kim, I'd like to add with that too is we always have to remember is the R2, if we blow the whistle for something, we're going to give the fault first. Because when I've been observing some officials, I've noticed that it seems like a lot of the R2s maybe want to award the point first. But just remember, if you're the R2, which you don't get to blow your whistle that many times, that when you do, you give the fault first. And so one of the other things I want to go over is the ball outside the antenna. That's one of the things I've also observed. It seems like the R2 doesn't want to blow the whistle when that happens. But just make sure that if it goes outside the antenna on the R2 side, that you blow the whistle and then you go out and the R1 will award the point with you. And that's one of the other things I've noticed is it seems like a lot of R1s will come back with the out signal when they don't need to. So if the R2 signals something, all you have to do is award the point. So, and again, it's just one of those things. It's a habit that it may take a little bit to break. But as you guys work together and maybe notice that the other partner is doing that, maybe just kind of educate them for that. The other one I kind of want to go over is the timeout procedure, because that's another thing that I think sometimes maybe isn't done correctly because we don't do it that often. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed is make sure that when the R2 calls the timeout that they double tweet. Because I was observing officials, like I mentioned last week, and twice the server actually served the ball because they thought it was the beckon for that. They thought it was the whistle for the serve. So just make sure anytime there's a game interruption, which is if that's a substitution or a timeout, it's a double tweet instead of just a single tweet when you actually start the timeout.
Craig, doesn't the double tweet happen when the ball is not in live play?
Correct.
So if the ball's not in live play, the R2 will double tweet and to take the court away from the R1 to administer whatever they need to administer and then give it back when they're done.
Correct. Yep, that is correct. So one of the other things I've noticed is, let's say, and I'm going to do it on the screen here too, which may be backwards, but the R2 will double tweet. They're going to give the timeout signal with the same hand as if they're given a touch, because that's one of the other things I've noticed. And then they're going to point to the center of the court. So it's timeout, and then you point to the center of the court, and then they're just going to discreetly tell you how many timeouts you've used. So that's what the R2 is going to do at the beginning of the timeout. The R1, all they're going to do at the beginning of the timeout is they're also going to do the timeout signal with the R2 and then point to the center of the court, and that's all they're going to do at the beginning of the timeout. So then, so after the R2 does that, they're going to turn around to this to the scorer and just verify things like how many subs they've maybe used, how many timeouts they've used. It's just good communication with the scorer just to make sure that you're all on the same page. And then when there's 45 seconds left, or I'm sorry, used, or 15 seconds left in the timeout, you're going to do another double tweet to have the teams come back onto the court. And then what happens at the end of it is you are always going to end the timeout with a horn. So let's say both teams are out there ready to start. Then you're going to turn around and point to the scoreboard operator and say, hey, buzz the horn. Or if it gets very close to the end of the timeout, just let it run out. So you always want to make sure that you end with a horn. And then what you're going to do is you're going to turn around and look at the R1 and well, actually, if any of the teams have used their second timeout, what you're going to do is you're going to turn to the coach of the team that called the timeouts, do the timeout signal, and say, coach, you used both your timeouts. Then you're going to turn around to the R1, and both of you at the same time are going to go up high with how many timeouts you've used. Okay, so that's what you guys are both going to do. And then as soon as that's done, the R2 is going to always give the court back when you take it for a substitution or a timeout. And it's always going to be on the outside hand of the receiving team. So that's just kind of a little synopsis of kind of what you do as the timeout procedure. And again, it's one of those things, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But it's just one of those things that I think we want to communicate and try to educate people the correct way to do it.
And just a quick
go ahead, Kim.
Sorry. And just a quick reminder, don't rush timeouts. Each team gets a full minute.
That was going to be one of the things that I was going to point out. And then just as Craig was talking, did a great job explaining those things. A lot of the items that Craig is talking about is, one of the items that we've talked about now for a couple of years, which we call preventative officiating. When you have those conversations with the scorer, when you're communicating with the coaches, it can prevent some things from happening later on in the match that you don't want to have happen. And so the more that you can do that, the better. That helps out trying to keep everybody on the same page throughout the match. So appreciate everybody's time today. Does anybody have anything else before we wrap up for today?
Jeff, the only other thing I'd say on really good information found in the case book, starting on page 69 through like 75, it tells R1s and R2s exactly their match responsibilities and how to administer just what we've talked about. So refer to those, and the case book will help you out a lot.
Well, like I said, I appreciate everybody's time. I did look real quick while we were talking. Officials registration for this year is closed at this point, and I'm happy to report that we are up about 10 officials from last year. And so when nationally we can continue to see officials numbers going down, to actually have an increase here in Nebraska, I think speaks a little bit to what we see in the volleyball community in our state. So thank you to everyone for being an official. Thanks to our coaches. If there's anybody watching here that trying to gain some knowledge into how hard our officials are working to get things right. And as long as everyone enjoys these videos, we're going to keep making them. So Ken, Craig, Kim, thanks for your time today. We will be back next week.